is the main reason? What issues do you have with the government? What brings you here?
Mainly for my grandkids.
I'm just going to do, this is really great. Look at all these young people here. This is the future generation that's getting on the bus. They're over here for American Freedom event. And we're going to, hopefully, we'll have a chance to talk to them again tomorrow, the last day of the event. Okay. Thank you.
Well, hi, I'm Richard, and this is my wife Barbara, and we're here because we want to do what we can to see some prosperity come back.
If you're in St. Louis, you can find her on KFTK. She's a political commentator, describes herself as a conservatarian.
Oh.
Talkers Magazine Top 100 Heavy Hitters in 2012. I'm not sure how she got this, but Nielsen named her one of the 16 most powerful mothers online. Yep. And we have Remy Muntasifi. Now, if you've not gone online or seen his parodies at goremy.com, go there. They're terrific. He's a stand-up comedian and a musician and a very talented political mind as well. And last but not least, Greg Gutfeld. Apparently I don't need to make an introduction, but for those of you who don't sleep, like him and the five.
All right, well, good to be here. My name is Remy. All right, my name is Remy, and good to be here in Orlando with you all. At the honor to be a part of this, and just wanted to start by saying my dad actually escaped from Iraq, and so that's kind of cool that I'm at the Defending the American Dream Summit. He's honored as well. So I wanted to talk a little bit about making videos. I make like YouTube videos, and I want some people to, I know for a fact there are people in here that are more than capable of making great humorous videos online. And I was wondering what was preventing people from doing it, so I walked around yesterday and tried to ask people what their concerns were for not attempting it, because basically I jumped over the hurdle. You know, a lot of people were saying their first concern was, you know, I'm not even the funniest one of my friends. And like, I'm not either. So I tried it and it worked out. Number two was, I have odd ideas. That's not bad. You know, there's niches for everyone. It's okay to be different. For example, I've been trying to get in shape recently, and everybody says you need to run on the treadmill. Oh, go run on the treadmill. But to me, the treadmill, at that point, what separates us from the gerbils? Yeah. It's like, what'd you do today? Oh, I ran on a treadmill. Anything else? Yes, I ate a paper towel roll. So this video that I did recently, I want to show as an example. I had one idea. This is about the NSA. This is when the tapping sort of thing, allegations came up. And I just had one idea. I had the first joke idea, this oh yeah idea. And I just kind of took it from there, and I just want to play a little bit of it just to give an idea of what that's. It's a slow jam.
Rolling around in a black Mercedes, cruising around town and it's packed with ladies. Gotta keep it going, yeah, I'm roaming the map, and no, I never stop till I find something to tap. Nokia, iPhone, Galaxy 3, Facebook, and your search history. Gmail, voicemail, I gotta have it. It's got an on-off switch, baby. I'm making a list, I'm checking it twice. It doesn't matter the message or even kind of device. Everything your daughter sends, we've got it ingrained. Why do you think Anthony Weiner wants back in the game? got so many aides.
So that's just like a quick example of
Greg and Remy are just geniuses at comedy, and I'm just a mean girl. I'm like Veronica from Heathers. I'm just spends it at church. Thank you for your dollars for Jesus.
One of the things I like to do is humor to me, I don't actively search out humor, I search out truth and try to make truth funny. And I'm going to talk about this in my speech later, but if you use humor in a surprising way in an event, you can actually create kind of a movement or a thought that people didn't have before. For example, the mosque, when they were building the mosque by the World Trade Center, which they still are, I got nothing against it because you can do whatever you want, but it's in bad taste. And then I started thinking, well, how would they understand it, the guys that are building it, which is I think called Park 51 or Park 52, I can't remember, one of the parks. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to build a gay bar next door. Why not?
I've been voting for years.
Hey, hi, sorry to do something last night, Charles. We're over here. We're going to be soon to be finalizing this big event with some great speakers. Right now, we have our lovely guest. She's from North Carolina.
Ann Sullivan.
And I'm seeing you from North Carolina.
Right.
I like what you're wearing. Raise that up a little bit.
And the shoes. And my pocketbook.
We all together here need to just take a look at the outfit. You're really patriotic.
Thank you. I like to be patriotic.
Well, okay, you show it. You do a good taste in doing it.
Thank you.
And that's what we're here to do. What brings you really here to this event? What was the main topic?
Well, I missed the first conference, but I have been here. This is my 6th in a row. And I get feedback, I get energized, I get information to take back to my grassroots. And if you want to know what's going on in government, what's going on behind the scenes that you won't hear from your legislators, you find it out at one of these workshops.
My grandmother held the post for 3 or 4 terms. He is an ultra-liberal, ACU rating of 0 to 3. On his best year, he was a 3. His average is about, for terms, is about a 0.
And you're going to have a Republican primary?
Yes, we will.
Who else is running?
We don't have, well, you have till February to declare, so no one's declared yet. We've got an idea, a few who will. But I really hope to represent the city of Indianapolis, and for the first time in 42 years, and bring us back to the kind of
Anybody
Midwest.
in Dan Quayle's family planning on running?
No, they're all out in Arizona.
Okay.
Because I grew up in his hometown, Huntington. My first 12 years. When I was playing Little League Baseball, he used to write articles about my baseball team.
Oh, wow.
But his son Ben was out there in Congress too for a while.
Yeah.
But now they're all gone. And that's a big deal because they used to own the Indianapolis Star, the city's biggest and the state's biggest paper. Well, it's Gannett now. So Republicans have a hard time getting any truth in there, any words of wisdom because of the Indianapolis Star. Yeah, right. Anything owned by Gannett is going to have a terrible leftward slant.
Can I ask you, where you come from? What state?
Arkansas.
Arkansas?
Yes, sir.
A lot of you, we all came all together, or did you come separate?
Now we come on the bus, a bunch of us
So
did.
you're in the bus crew?
Yes, sir.
Okay, are these your 2 children here, or this young man and young girl?
This is my daughter, and this is a friend of ours, one of her friends.
Okay, and they wanted to come for what reason? They were interested in?
Yes, sir. About
okay.
saving our country.
What?
About bringing our liberties back.
Saving their future is what
Yes, sir. Future.
Hi, young lady. Ronald, welcome to Florida. We can get a little closer to your dad here. A little closer to your dad. And what's your first name?
Amy.
Amy, how old are you, Amy?
I'm 15.
15. And you're getting involved and interested in politics? Well, I think you should because this is your future district. And where are you from?
I'm from Texarkana, Arkansas.
Arkansas too.
Arkansas Blue.
I
I sure am. We're on the same bus, that is.
What?
I said we're on that same journey, the same bus.
Okay, and exactly what is the main reason why you came?
Education and knowledge and meet a few people.
Alright, I'm Don Poe. I'm from Granbury, Texas, which is about 30 miles southwest of Fort Worth. And we came over just to learn more about being an activist and what to do about helping get our country straightened out.
To the elevator the other day, I was arriving here in Orlando, and the governor, Bobby Jindal of Louisiana, was there. And I didn't get a chance to lobby him, but I would love to talk to him about the Red River Commission, Arkansas Red River Commission, that is. Because down there in Louisiana, from Shreveport down to New Orleans is a big port, and you have, with the Red River, navigational stuff, but where it starts is out in New Mexico from the Palo de Oro Canyons. You have a lot of possibility of jobs it creates with ports and everything else coming in. But from where I live in Miller County, the Red River goes all the way around that county. So what I'm trying to do is get the Arkansas governor, the Texas governor, Louisiana governor, and Oklahoma governor to come together, be able to get the funding that was once there. We had $10 million put in a fund, and that fund was taken out of that fund from the Arkansas Red River Commission. And they're doing a feasibility study, been doing it for the last 40 years. And she's within $1 million in 1 year away from having that study complete. And then you have where you can make it navigational from down Shreveport all the way back up, maybe around Sherman, Texas, and all that. So the area of region, you affect a huge region. So hopefully I can get that done and maybe get that in the next few years, get the legislation to pass that, give us our funding back, and get that Red River navigational again.
Okay, very good. Is your name again?
My name is Greg Jones.
Greg Jones.
And I live in Texarkana, Arkansas. That's District 1. So I'm a young Republican at this point, so trying to get there and get some things.
About wild animals, I guess they do. Yeah, it was that too, I think, because of the, deer. Yeah. If I go to like Missouri, I'll do that. Those two people there. Yo! Get them. Yeah, those are open.
We're here today because we are here to fight and to repeal Obamacare. Folks, the fight is no longer in the Capitol 2 hours north up the road. The fight is in the Capitol 500 feet that way. The Supreme Court said that the states have tremendous jurisdiction over how to implement Obamacare. And that's exactly what this fight's all about. That's exactly why we need to stop it right here today.
And when the president tells us that somehow we don't care about our fellow Americans because we oppose his program, we're going to call him on. Because we care, we're taking the time, and you're taking the time from family and work and community to come here to protect our fellow Virginians from his Obamacare. That's what it's about. We do care. That's why you're here. That's why you got on buses this morning. That's why you drove down this morning. That's why you took time away from the kids and the grandkids, and some kids took time away from everything else to come here.
People did a great job in organizing and getting us down there so that our elected representatives could hear from us, and that's very important. And I'm going to continue this fight to the end because it can't be just one time. We have to continuously let our representatives know how we, the citizens, feel out there.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Tim Phillips, President of Americans for Prosperity Foundation. are there still some people still at the party in the park from last night? That's what I want to know. Did we lose? We're not the U.S. Army Rangers. We leave men and women behind in amusement parks, all right? I'm just going to be completely honest about that. We apologize. It was a little warm in some of the breakout rooms this morning. There was an AC malfunction overnight. A little warm, meaning it was 217 degrees. Just a little, but a lot of us are Southerners. We can take the heat, right? Yeah. And we're in politics. I know we can all take the heat. Because we're not getting out of the kitchen or the breakout session. But we're glad that you are taking advantage of those breakout sessions. You survived the boot camp of day one. And now you're down to the afternoon general session. What a day. And
Thank you. Anytime. Ted Cruz, I love you. I love you, Ted Cruz.
Thank you. And I love each of you.
Thank you.
Now let me start with a word of warning. By virtue of each of you being here today, tomorrow morning you're going to be audited by the IRS.
Been there, done that.
So I appreciate the courage of your convictions. You know, right now, one of the most popular television shows in America is Duck Dynasty. Now, I'm told that President Obama's never watched this show. And apparently an aide recently came into the Oval Office to try to explain it to him. Said, Mr. President, it's all about this Southern God-fearing family of entrepreneurs who love liberty and love to hunt. Obama responded, so is it a fantasy show? And the response was, no, Mr. President, it's more like a horror film. And so the president immediately ordered an IRS audit. You know, there's a disconnect in Washington. Politicians in Washington look to shows like Duck Dynasty, look to men and women in this room, look to Americans, and don't understand where we're coming from. We are facing enormous fiscal and economic challenges, and the unhappy truth is, it has been career politicians in both parties who have gotten us in this mess. But let me give you a word of optimism. There is a grassroots uprising that is sweeping this nation.
Yes!
Y'all are here today, you're engaged in your home states because the American people are standing up and saying we want our freedom back.
Amen.
And I'm going to give the simplest and best advice for President Obama and for Republicans and Democrats in Congress. Listen to the people. You know, earlier this year, one of the first battles we had in the U.S. Senate, I was proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with my friend Rand Paul in a 13-hour filibuster. When Rand stood up to filibuster drones, the Washington Graybeard said, "What are you doing?" And what happened is the American people got engaged. Millions of Americans became fixated by C-SPAN. a phrase that doesn't occur naturally in the English language. Americans began tweeting, began speaking out, and you saw, as a result of your engagement, President Obama forced to do what he had refused to do for 3 consecutive weeks, which is admit in writing the Constitution limits his ability to target U.S. citizens. The president was forced to listen to the people. We saw another battle on guns. Now on this, Vice President Joe Biden you know, the nice thing is, you don't even need a punchline. You just say his name, people laugh. But Vice President Joe Biden had some advice. He said, if your house is attacked, just go outside with a double-barreled shotgun and fire both barrels in the air. Which is very, very good advice. If it so happens your house is being attacked by a flock of geese. But again, Washington politicians, there was a consensus that the federal government needed to pass new laws restricting our Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. And the American people rose up overwhelmingly and said, protect our Bill of Rights. And as a result of your leadership, your passion, when those votes came to a vote on the floor of the Senate, every single proposal that would have undermined the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms was voted down on the floor of the Senate. The president was forced to listen to the people. That's right. Now, we've got a lot of current challenges. None more serious than the prospect that this president may lead our nation into war. You know, this week we saw Parliament come back and debate going to war, and Parliament said, no, we don't want to go to war in Syria. We saw the Knesset in Israel come back into session to debate what to do about Syria. And you know, I'm very pleased to tell you, just a few minutes ago, President Obama, in a nationally televised address, told the American people he is going to wait to bring Congress back into session and listen to Congress. That's the way it's supposed to work. Absolutely. The Constitution gives Congress the power to declare war. Amen. And I am very, very glad that the President listened to bipartisan calls to come before Congress and come before the American people and make the case, not based on international norms, not based on international law, but based on the only proper criterion for potential military action, which is the vital national security interest of the United States of America. Which he doesn't care about. On Syria, the President and Republicans and Democrats in Congress need to listen to the people. You look at other fights going on. Right now, the House of Representatives has before it an immigration bill. On immigration, the President and Republicans and Democrats in Washington need to listen to the people. Right now, the federal government is trying to impose Common Core education standards on the states. On Common Core, the President and Republicans and Democrats in Congress need to listen to the people. And you know, if you talk about priorities, every single poll that is done of the American people over and over again shows the number one priority of the American people is restoring jobs in the economy.
Thank you!
You know, actually, it doesn't matter whether you're asking Republicans or Democrats or independents. It ain't a complicated question for most Americans. Let's get economic growth back. And I'll tell you the single most frustrating aspect of serving in the U.S. Senate these last 8 months is in that time we have spent virtually zero time even discussing jobs in the economy.
Shovel-ready jobs.
You know, politicians scratch their head and say, why is it that Congress has 10, 12, 14% approval ratings? Well, when you have career politicians in both parties ignoring the will of the people over and over and over again, don't be surprised when we the people aren't happy about it. My number one priority in office is restoring economic growth. Economic growth is foundational to every other challenge we've got, whether it's unemployment, whether it's the national debt, whether it's maintaining our military strength. With growth, we do all of that. Without it, we can't do any of it. And I'll tell you the two most effective levers the federal government has to restore economic growth are fundamental tax reform and regulatory reform. Now, we have seen in recent months reports of the IRS demanding of citizens, tell us what books you're reading. Prepare content of your prayers. Let me be very, very clear. The federal government has no business asking any American the content of our prayers. Now, on one level, that scandal is indicative of the corruption and abuse of power in this administration. But on another level, it is the result of far too much power being aggregated in Washington, regardless of which party is in power. And that's why I think the simplest and best solution is we should abolish the IRS. Now, I'll tell you, going back to the disconnect we talked about, when you say that in Washington, D.C., they scream and yell as well. But from a slightly different perspective. Listen, in Washington, talking about abolishing the IRS is considered crazy talk. Why? Because they're an army of lobbyists on K Street that make hundreds of millions of dollars carving out exception after exception after loophole in the IRS code. How do we get it done? We need a simple, fair, flat tax. So that every American can fill out his or her taxes on a postcard. That will only happen if millions upon millions of Americans rise up and demand it of our elected officials in Washington. That is the only way it will happen. And the second most critical piece to restoring economic growth is regulatory reform. You know, and the single most important regulatory reform we could do is we need to repeal every single word of Obamacare. you right now, we have a moment in time. In the next 30 days, we have our single best opportunity we have ever had to stand up and defund Obamacare. Now, I want to spend a few minutes talking about the battle to defund Obamacare, because I think it is the most important fight facing our country right now. Listen, Obamacare is the #1 job killer in the United States of America. If you want economic growth back, nothing is holding it back more than Obamacare. You know, just a couple of weeks ago, I sat down at a small business roundtable in Kerrville, Texas, small town in central Texas. Had about 20 small business owners and asked each of them, share with me an issue that's on your heart, whatever it was, totally open-ended question. As we went around the room, over half of those small business owners described how Obamacare was the single biggest challenge they faced in their business. 4 or 5 of them talked about how they had 30, 40 employees. They had opportunities to expand their business, but they weren't going to expand because if they crossed the threshold of 50 employees, they'd fall under Obamacare and that cost would drive them out of business. You know, one woman described how she owns several fast food restaurants and almost choking up with tears, she described how she's been forced to forcibly reduce the hours of her employees to 29 hours a week. And she said, listen, these people have been with us 10, 20 years. These are single moms. These are people who are struggling and they can't afford to feed their families on 29 hours a week. But you know what? They can't feed their families if I go out of business either. Another fellow who's in the business of manufacturing hunting blinds described how he was forced to move his manufacturing overseas to China. And he said, listen, I want to manufacture here in the United States. That was 150 to 200 good manufacturing jobs. But if they're here, I come under Obamacare and we can't be competitive in the marketplace with the cost that that's imposing. Now look, you may not believe small business owners. You may not believe the politicians who talk about it. But how about Max Baucus, the Democrat who wrote Obamacare? He describes it as a major train wreck. That's the guy who wrote it. Now, maybe he didn't read it.
Pretty hard to read when you're as drunk as he is.
James Hoffa, the president of the Teamsters, has said Obamacare is destroying the 40-hour work week. That is the backbone of the American middle class. Now, that's not me saying that, that's the Teamsters. The IRS Employees Union has publicly asked to be exempted from Obamacare. These are the guys in charge of enforcing it on the rest of us. And of course, President Obama, most shamefully, has lawlessly exempted members of Congress from Obamacare. And that was at the behest of Harry Reid, the Senate Democrats who passed it. And you want to see the difference, that disconnect between career politicians and the American people, you don't have to look any further than right there. So what do we do? A lot of good suggestions there.
Indicting.
But let me focus on one direct fight. On September 30th, the continuing resolution that funds the federal government expires. I, along with a number of other senators, have publicly pledged under no circumstance will we vote for any continuing resolution that funds even 1 penny of Obamacare.
Tell John Boehner!
The reaction here, just like with abolishing the IRS, is exactly the same as the reaction in Washington, except they're yelling different things. And listen, I'm going to be brutally honest. If the ordinary rules of Washington apply, if the forums in which the case has to be made are the smoke-filled rooms of Washington, we can't win this fight. I can't win this fight. Mike Lee can't win this fight. No elected politician in Washington can win this fight. The only people who can win this fight are you. We are trying to fundamentally change the rules of Washington. We are trying to fundamentally remind people that under our Constitution, sovereignty doesn't reside in Washington, D.C. It resides with we the people. Now, right now, the people who are fighting the hardest against our effort to defund Obamacare, sadly, are Republicans. Over and over again they say, we can't win this fight. Yes, we can! Well, you know what? You lose 100% of the fights that you surrender at the outset. The path to winning this fight is simple. The House of Representatives, in my opinion, should pass a continuing resolution, funds the entirety of the federal government, every bit of it, except Obamacare. And it should explicitly prohibit spending any money, discretionary or mandatory, on Obamacare. Now we've seen the next page of this play. President Obama, the Senate Democrats will get up and scream and yell, the mean, nasty Republicans are threatening to shut down the government. And at that point, we got to do something we haven't done in a long, long time. Stand up and win the argument. Say, look, we have voted to fund the federal government. We don't want to shut the federal government down. President Obama has already granted waivers to every giant corporation in America to spare them the cost of Obamacare. Why is President Obama threatening to shut the government down? To deny those same waivers to hard families. President Obama grants waivers to members of Congress. Why is President Obama threatening to shut the federal government down? To deny those waivers to hardworking American families. And if President Obama forces a partial temporary shutdown, you have an impasse. One side or the other has to blink. How do you win this fight? Don't blink! The grassroots awakening that we are seeing is powerful. You know, just a few weeks ago, a national website was launched. And Obamacare began to be lost. Just a few weeks ago, the national website don'tfundit.com was launched. Do you know, as of just a few minutes ago, there were 970,000 signatures on don'tfundit.com. How do we get men and women in Washington to listen to the American people? we get millions upon millions of Americans rising up, holding them accountable. Between now and September 30th, if we see millions of Americans going to don'tfundit.com, signing the petition, picking up the phone, calling Republicans, calling Democrats, calling their elected officials, and saying, stand up and do the right thing. If the American people demand, stop Obamacare, the greatest job killer in this country, eventually, our elected officials will be forced to do what they should have been doing all along, which is listen to the people. By Labor Day, don'tfundit.com is going to break 1 million. And if every one of those million gets one other person, we'll make it 2 million. And if every one of those gets one other person, we'll make it 4 million. And there comes a point where they have no choice but listen to the people. I want to close by saying... That's a wonderful reaction. And I have to admit, it's much, much better than the alternative where you say, in conclusion, and the audience bursts into applause. But I want to close by saying 2 things. Number 1, thank you. Thank you for your passion. That's the same thing my wife says when I come home from the gym early. But I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your passion, for being here, for being away from your family or bringing your family here, for your energy to turn this country around. Thank you for you. Your passion is what's going to do it, because every one of us remembers what Ronald Reagan said, that freedom is never more than 1 generation away from extinction. That we don't pass it on to our kids in the bloodstream. And not a one of us in this room wants to see the day when we're talking to our children or our children's children and answering the question, what was it like to live in America when people were free? That's why we're here, because the men and women in this room are not willing to answer that question. We are standing together to defend liberty, to defend the Constitution, and to restore that shining city on a hill that is the United States of America. Thank you, and God bless you.
Whittle to the stage.
Hi, everybody. What an incredible honor it is to follow Ted Cruz on stage. I actually preceded him last time I saw him. Ted Cruz is one of the most remarkable men in politics because you can just watch him speak. You know he's the real deal. You know he's speaking from the heart. He's still backstage, I think, still probably within the sound of my voice. So before I get started tonight, if you're back there, Ted, just 2 quick pieces of advice for you. First of all, whatever materials you may be stockpiling down in Texas in order to build a wall on the Mexican border, I would instead deploy them in a circle around Austin, and don't let any of that thinking get out of Austin and into the rest of Texas. And the second thing I would say to Ted is, just as speaking as a friend, is I notice he likes to go back and forth. I get used to standing behind the podium if I were you, Mr. President. It provides a little ballistic protection. Not against bullets or anything, but those weenies don't know how to operate a gun anyway. But if somebody wants to throw a bran muffin at you or a glitter bomb, just keep most of your outfit clean. So I'm just going to pretty much stay right here. I was listening to President Unilateral Military Action just a few moments ago out there, and I have to tell you, if you had heard what he just said, in contradiction of everything he ran against, and contradiction of all the criticisms he leveled against George Bush, who I might remind the current president was able to get several UN resolutions and something like 30 allies on board before he went overseas. I just want to tell you, listening to President Obama speak just got me so fired up to come out and talk to you people, because I am tired to losing to these traitor narcissist weenies. I'm just sick of it. So let's talk about how we can do that. Let's talk about how we can win. We need candidates like Mr. Cruz who are not only able to articulate the message, they actually have the courage, the personal courage to vote against it. That goes a long way. But I would like to talk to you very briefly about something that's in my wheelhouse, which is the intersection of pop culture and politics. Everybody talks about politics and pop culture like they're separate things. Everybody says, well, the left has Hollywood, but we have whatever. But if the left has Hollywood, they're going to win. And the reason they're going to win is because people, we learned this from the last election, people don't vote based on what they feel, what they think about. They don't vote based on what they know. They vote based on how they feel about things they learn from the pop culture. As I said earlier today, exit polling of people who voted in November said that Mitt Romney won on the economy, which was far away the most important issue. Mitt Romney won that by 20 points. He won on the deficit reduction, he won on jobs, he won on defense, won on everything. Obama won the election because they asked, who cares most about you? And Obama, I think, won 89% of that particular vote. I know it sounds silly, but it's true. They won the election because they had managed to convince the American people that we were the villains in a story that they've been telling for 40 years. And people will never vote for the villains, not ever. Doesn't matter how good the villain's policies are, doesn't matter how boring or bland the hero is. You can have a bland, boring hero like a farm boy from Tatooine named Luke Skywalker, and you can have a dynamic, interesting villain like Darth Vader who's nothing but power, and they will take the hero every time. And as long as we're the villains in our own culture, we're never going to win elections. We never are. So we have to learn how to fight that fight. And I've got just a few minutes to help teach you do that. Now, if you don't think that pop culture has an effect on you, if you don't think that there's a political message that comes in through movies and television, let's just do a little experiment. I always enjoy playing this game. I'm going to start a sentence and I'm going to ask you to finish it. If I was a political operative, one of Barack Obama's progressive allies, let's say, and I could start a political statement and you could finish the sentence, we both know that I had you, right? We both know that I had such incredible control over what you were thinking about that if I could start a sentence and you finished it, I had you. So I'm going to start a couple of sentences and you can finish them. Ready? Look, up in the sky, it's a bird. Okay, we'll go a little bit younger this time. Here's one for people about my age. Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale of a fateful trip. Started from this tropic shore aboard this tiny trip. And one finally for the younger ones out there. It seems today that all you see is violence in movies and sex on TV. So what am I getting at here? Well, what I'm getting at here is this. If you could finish the sentence from Superman, if I could say, look up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane, and you could go, it's Superman, then that means that you know the finishing lines of the Superman introduction. You didn't have to go to a website. Nobody had to hand you a pamphlet. You knew how to finish that sentence because Superman was in your head. He'd been in your head for 40 years. And everything that Superman represents politically, truth, justice, and the American way, is in your head too. Any audience of people that grew up with classical Superman automatically love this country because Superman is about the best America that we could be. And when Superman was all over the pop culture, we were a nation that loved this country. Now, 20 years after the peak of Superman's popularity, along comes Gilligan's Island. That's pretty neutral, kind of, in terms of politics. Really about the only message you can get from Gilligan's Island is, if you want to get off the island, all you really have to do is just kill Gilligan. We'll be off next week. But, if you're a young person out there today, and you can finish the theme song from Family Guy, then all of the anti-American, anti-capitalist, anti-Christian, anti-morality messages of Family Guy are in your head as completely and thoroughly as that theme song is. You're programmed by the pop culture. You're programmed by story. Everything we do is story. When you meet relatives at Thanksgiving, the first thing you want is you want the stories. What happened? What was Uncle Joe doing? The Bible is a collection of stories. And when you get out of here today, you will go home and turn on the story box and you watch hours and hours of stories. It's all about stories. And if we're the villain in all of the stories that are told, we're never going to win another election again, ever. We have to go on the offensive. We can't be the victims of the mythology anymore. So, for 40 years now, the progressives on the left have been telling the same story to the American people. They tell it in virtually every movie that's made, in every television show that's made, in every news broadcast, but mostly in the movies and television and music. They tell the same story to the American people, and by telling them that same story again and again and again in thousands of different forms, but with the same exact message, they have turned us into a nation that is at least 50% socialist and collective and gets worse every single day. So, first thing we have to do is we have to understand what that message is. What is the message? Not just that our kids are being told, but that you're being told, because it's actually even affecting you. Even you, point of the spear conservatives, are affected by this message. So, what's this message that the progressive left has been telling all this time? Excuse me one moment while I ruin my political career. Thank you. Well, they tell you basically it's not a complex message because the simpler the message is, the better it is for them, the easier it is to remember. So, if you think about it, every movie, every TV show that you and your children, especially your children, get contains the same three messages, and they're very simple. The first message that they tell our kids all the time is that wealth is unearned. Wealth is unearned. Every time you see a movie and the reveal of the villain, who is it? It's a bad guy, it's a businessman. Maybe he's testing drugs on legitimate third world people in India in order to get more of his filthy money. Maybe it's some manufacturer who's putting out a car that he knows it's going to explode and he doesn't care if people die as long as he gets his money. Wealth is unearned and rich people are evil. Now, why is that so important that they constantly preach that wealth is unearned? Well, because if wealth was earned, if it was the product of hard work, then taking away somebody's wealth and giving it to somebody else would be stealing, wouldn't it? It'd be stealing. But if wealth is unearned, if rich people took more than their fair share of a limited pie, well, then taking their money and giving it to other people is not stealing, it's justice. It's justice. Social justice. So in order for them to tell their story of socialism and collectivism, they have to tell you that wealth is unearned. They do this all the time. The second thing they'll tell our young people especially is they'll tell them that everybody's special. How many times do you think you hear that? And everybody's special. We're going to play a baseball game, we're not going to keep score because then there'd be winners and losers. Everybody's special, everybody gets a gold star. What does that get them? Well, think about this. If everybody's special, that is essentially the same thing as saying nobody's special, right? If everybody's special, then nobody's special. Everybody's the same. If nobody's special, then what does achievement mean? If you're just as good of a person, if you spent your entire life out back of a 7-Eleven smoking blunts, and some other guy was working his tail off for 20 years learning how to be a brain surgeon, but if everybody's special, what's the difference? What does achievement mean? What does success mean? What does hard work mean? What does individuality mean if everybody's special? Nothing. Now you can't tell the American people that nobody's special, because that'd be mean. But you can tell them that everybody's special, and that means exactly the same thing. So that's the second thing they tell our kids. And the third thing they tell us all the time is pretty simple too. They say, let us help you. Let us help you. We just want to give you free health care. We want to give you free cars. We want to give you a free phone. Let us help you. Why won't you let us help you? We're just trying to help you. It's those darn Republicans who are trying to stop us from helping you. We just want to help you. Let us help you. All we want to do is help you, give you free food and free clothing and free transportation and free phones. And all we expect in return is all of your money, all of your worth, all of your freedom, all of your work. All you have to do is work one day every other year on the first Tuesday in November. That's the only work we're going to ask of you, is 2 hours of work once every 2 years for us, and then we can continue to help you. It's imprisonment and it's slavery. So how do we get it back? How do we win it back? Well, if we start talking about constitutional values and fiscal responsibility and all these other things that we do because we're right, if we start depending on history and logic and reason and all of the things that we have as weapons in our arsenal and just lay those out to people, they're not going to get it because it's not a story. We have to put it to them in a way that is understandable. The way the Bible teaches ethics is through stories. The Good Samaritan, the prodigal son, they're stories. So we have to be able to tell a story, and we have to be able to sell 3 things back to the American people. And frankly, folks, if we can't sell these 3 things to the American people, we need to be in another line of work. Because if we want to recover this country, we have to match those 3 messages that the left has with 3 simple messages of our own. And these 3 things that we have to sell back to the American people are pretty simple. We have to sell freedom, private property, and virtue. But you can't use those words anymore because young people have been so removed from the ideas behind these concepts that when you say these words like virtue, they think you mean coming to them and saying you're not allowed to have sex till you're, 70 or something. But that's not what it means. So we have to take these 3 things and put them in very easy to understand terms. There's nothing to it, really. Freedom, what's freedom? If you're trying to sell freedom to people who only know freedom as a word on a piece of parchment because they've had so much of it for so long, how do you sell freedom to young people? You say to a group of young people, you say, raise your hands if you like to be told what to do. Raise your hands. How many of you out there like to be told what to do? None of them. None of them like to be told what to do. How many of you like to tell other people what to do? None of them will raise their hands there either, although many of them would. So we say, no, I agree with you. I don't like to be told what to do, and I don't like to tell other people what to do. I think we should be left alone. I think we should be able to do what we darn well want to do. What do you think? I agree. They agree too. They're already a third of the way back home to conservatism, to individuality, to becoming freedom-loving Americans. Do you want to be left alone, yes or no? Yes, I do. So do we. That's what we're all about, being left alone. We're not the ones who are trying to tell you how big your sodas can be and whether or not you have to wear helmets and whether there has to be a warning label on this skateboard or whether or not how much your thermostat is going to be set at. They are. They're the ones who are telling you what to do. We want to be left alone. What's the second thing we have to sell people on? Private property. How do you sell them on private property? I did a speech at Oberlin College. I mentioned this earlier. Oberlin is the most liberal college in America. Oberlin College is where reason and logic go to die. And I asked these students, I said, how many of you up there consider yourselves to be socialists? And 7 of them, 7 out of 10, said, yes, I do. And I'd say, okay, what's the core precept of socialism, you socialists? And they really couldn't answer me because they don't really know. So I said, I'm not really here to argue your side of the argument for you, but I'll do it anyway. I have some time on my hands. Isn't it from each according to his ability to each according to his need? Yeah, that's it. We like that. Okay, all of you kids out there who are socialists, I have an iPhone 5. What do you guys have? And I held up my iPhone, and they have droids, and they have all these other things. I said, I got an iPhone 5. I said, all of you socialists out there, I want you to bring your phones down and put them down to the front of the stage here. Just walk them down, leave them on the stage. What do you want our smartphones for? Well, I'm not a progressive. I'm not going to steal them. But I'll tell you what I will do. We're going to take all of your socialist phones, and when I'm done talking, all of us together are going to go to downtown Cleveland, and we're going to sell these phones for a bunch of money. We should be able to get $2,000 out of these phones easily. That's $120 bills. And then we're going to take those $20 bills and distribute them to the homeless people in Cleveland. So bring your phones down so we can redistribute the wealth from each according to his ability to each according to his need. You know how many of them came down? You know why? Because they're not socialists, they're capitalists, that's why. They're rock-ribbed capitalists when it comes to their own private property. They're all about redistributing other people's wealth to themselves, but when it's time to redistribute their wealth to somebody else, suddenly they're conservatives. And they know it. And they can't stand being pointed out to them that their Xbox 360, their toy, could feed a family in Africa for a year. So if you're really a socialist, sell the Xbox 360 and distribute the money, but they won't because they know that's their property. Hey, you can't take my phone, this is my phone. I agree. It's not really your phone, your parents bought it for you, but for the sake of the argument, I agree. So it's your stuff, right? That's the second thing, it's your stuff. And finally, the third thing is simple, it's very simple. Don't be a jerk. We believe in virtue. What does virtue mean? It's not like chastity. Virtue just means don't be a jerk. Raise your hand if you think it's okay to be a jerk. Raise your hand if you think it's okay to hit people or take their stuff. How many young people you think agree that that's okay? None of them. Okay. Don't be a jerk. Don't hit people. Don't take their stuff, because if you're not a jerk, then we can leave you alone. But if you are a jerk, now we need police cars, and we need cameras, and we need surveillance, and we need lawyers, and we need judges and bailiffs and prison guards and all the rest. Leave us alone. It's your stuff. Don't be a jerk. They're back and they're conservatives. They're on our team again. It's not that hard. So I'm out of time, so I'll just close by telling you this. If we cannot sell something this simple to the American people, if we keep getting bogged down in politics and policy and not talk about philosophy, morality, values in a way that is a story, then we don't deserve to win. We don't deserve to win. If we can't do something that simple, we don't deserve to win. So, in a nutshell, what are our two stories? The conservative message versus the big progressive message. If I had to put it in a sentence, I would say this. The conservative message, the conservative view of America is that we are a nation of steely-eyed missilemen with our eyes on a far horizon. We believe in loud guns and hot women and fast cars. We want to do what we want to do all the time, and we don't like a bunch of high school student council weenies telling us what we can do, when we can do, or how we're going to do it. We believe in freedom. We believe in prosperity. We believe in hard work, and if you work your tail off and you want to own 7 houses, and if 7 is the limit, then that's your business. If you want to smoke a blunt, that's your business too. It's your business, not my business. We believe in limited energy and the power of the human mind to achieve miraculous goals. We have 6 flags upon the moon, and there's nothing that we can't do if we put our minds to it. What's the big progressive message? What's the progressive vision for the future? A family of 10,000 humans left on the earth, sitting in thatched huts, sitting around burning cow pies, pulling parasites off each other, eating their sustainable algae cakes, and raising money for the Guatemalan water snake. I wonder which one I want to be a part of. It's the message. It's the politics. I'm over time, but I'll tell you this. If I ran the political wing of this country, I would abolish the term Tea Party. I had this conversation at a high school. I mentioned this in my in my session earlier. Kids said to me, I want to start a Tea Party group at my high school. What do you think I ought to do? What do you think I ought to sell? And I said, don't call it a Tea Party, don't say Republican, and don't say conservative. Say at 2:30 on Tuesday in room 402 will be a meeting of the Rebel Alliance. And when they ask you, when some kid asks you, the Rebel Alliance, what's that? Don't say politics, don't say anything. If they say, what is this Rebel Alliance thing? Turn to them and say, I'm not allowed to tell you about it. Oh, come on, man. What have we done? We've already set up a curiosity about the story, and we've already put them on the defensive so that they want to be in the story. I really can't talk about it. Really? No. Come on, you got to tell me something. Well, it's not for you. What do you mean it's not for me? It's not for you, dude. You can't handle this. Because if you're going to be a member of the Rebel Alliance, you're going to start out being outnumbered. We're outnumbered 100 to 1 on our best day. Go back to the rest of your pals in the Obama camp and you can all go along your business. You're not fit enough to be a member of the Rebel Alliance, because if you're a member of the Rebel Alliance, you have to know how economics work and history works, and sometimes things aren't as they seem. And it's only through a lifetime of a dedication of a lifetime to our mad Jedi skills that a small handful of us can get into these beat-up X-Wing fighters, get out there and face wave after wave after wave of TIE fighters, roll into that Death Star trench, evade the incoming laser blast, pickle off 2 photon bombs, put them in a hole the size of a pie tin, and get out of there before that Death Star blows up and takes everything with us. So you had better hope that we succeed. And parenthetically, the meeting of the Rebel Alliance will be in room 402 at 4:30.
Recognition of Service Award in honor of Joanne Sanders Pasquarello, and deepest gratitude for her many years of commitment and dedication to the free market and freedom movement. And Joe, thank you, buddy. Thank you for being with us and standing. And there's someone else we would be remiss, or some other folks, we would be utterly remiss as an organization if we didn't recognize and honor. And that's our veterans. And so if you're a veteran serving in either branches, would you please stand up? Young men, old. For honoring us with your presence. And we've talked a little bit about Americans for Prosperity's network out there in the States. We are blessed with 34 of the finest state directors. These are full-time permanent staff state directors, and they do great work. They work hard. They would claim they're underpaid as the president of the organization, and if their legal counsel's here, I deny that. They're paid just fine. But Teresa Oakey, who's the vice president for all of our state operations, Luke Hilgeman, our chief operating officer, the three of us, if it's okay, we wanted to bring up these state directors and let you see them. Is that all right? Guys, come on now. Where are you? Right over here. Our state directors at Americans for Prosperity. There's not a lot to look at, but they work really hard. No, but thank you. The activism and the staff are what makes this organization a service for you, and we're proud to have you guys. And we are going to finish the job of changing this great nation for the good, for economic freedom. Thank you all very much. We're going to continue with the program.
I got it.
All right. The next speaker that you folks are going to hear from is somebody that I've had the unique opportunity to spend a lot of time with during my days in Wisconsin. It's because this man works incredibly hard for the cause of freedom. He started his career by retiring Russ Feingold, right? Unbelievable. And he deserves his appreciation for that. But it's a man of the utmost integrity who believes in the cause of freedom and is doing everything he can to turn this country around and wake up as many citizens as he can to the fact that we are in a fiscal crisis. If you folks who had the opportunity to listen to him this morning with his slides, truly remarkable stuff, and if you haven't had a chance, check out his website, Ron Johnson at ussenate.com. Go and take a look at the stuff that he's talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome U.S. Senator Ron Johnson from the great state of Wisconsin.
First of all, thank you, Luke, for that kind introduction. Tim Phillips, everybody here at Americans for Prosperity. This organization is very dear to my heart, if not only just because of the name, Americans for Prosperity. You know, defending the dream, what a concept. You know, I realize just to walk in the halls here, I know I'm not a real big name. I know a lot of people don't know who I am and really what my background is, so if you'd indulge me a little bit, I'd like to, because I get asked a lot, I mean, how could a business guy never been in any public service? I mean, how did you get involved in running for the United States Senate seat? So let me just tell you the story because I think it sets up a discussion on freedom, which is what this is all about. But yeah, it all started for me really when I was asked to give a speech at a Tea Party in Oshkosh, actually on the same courthouse steps that Ronald Reagan unveiled some tax reform on. I kind of like that little poetry. But I was asked to give a speech on businesses or government regulations' effect on business. I said, listen, I'm happy to talk. That's not what I want to talk about. And they were nice enough. I said, well, come on, talk anyway. What I want to talk about was a couple weeks before that, I'd heard President Obama. Now, this isn't an exact quote. I call it an unkind paraphrase, but this is exactly what he meant. He said, you know, those greedy, money-grubbing doctors, well, they take out a set of tonsils or, you know, amputate a foot, look at the fee schedules for a few extra bucks. Now that was so outrageous, so offensive on so many different levels. But in particular, it offended me because our first child, our daughter Carrie, was born with a very serious congenital heart defect. Her aorta and pulmonary artery were reversed. So the first day of life, we rushed her down to Milwaukee Children's Hospital where one of those greedy, money-grubbing doctors came in at 1:30 in the morning and saved her life. That's what they do. 8 months later, when her heart was the size of a small plum, another group of incredibly dedicated, incredibly skilled medical professionals totally rebaffled the upper chamber of her heart. Her heart operates backwards now. But she's 30 years old, she's a nurse practitioner herself. Now she's taking care of those little babies. Now, earlier in the day, we referred to it, I gave a PowerPoint presentation, which you are very fortunate, I don't have the time or the PowerPoint to impress you folks here. So they did say to keep it positive and inspire, which, you know, if you were in my earlier session, it's a little difficult for me. But listen, I don't need a PowerPoint to really describe what ails this nation. It's that far too many Americans have either forgotten, or it's even more sad, were never taught the foundational premise of this nation. They don't know what our founders knew. Our founders came from dictatorial monarchies and aristocracies. They understood that Government wasn't here to solve our problems. They knew we needed some government. But government, by and large, was something to fear. Because as it grew, our freedoms necessarily receded. So as a result of that amnesia, that lack of knowledge, far too many Americans are willingly trading their freedom and ours for a false sense of economic security. Anybody feeling particularly secure? Now, I attended a breakfast meeting of the Business Roundtable in Washington. This is about a year ago now. And the head of Boeing stood up to welcome us. He said, hey, we're the Business Roundtable. We represent the largest corporations of America, who I realize are not in good standing with the American public right now. But that's conversations for another day. I was the first senator to stand up after he welcomed us to give my little talk. I went right to those comments. I said, we can't afford to have that be a conversation for another day. How did we come to a point in America where demonizing businesses, demagoguing against success rather than celebrating success, wins politically? I can guarantee you it will not produce the opportunity, the prosperity that is the heritage of this nation. It's going to destroy this nation. So I asked a rhetorical question, how did we get to this point? Well, I know. I lived through the 60s. I got white hair. I saw the radicals take over our university system. We had David Horowitz here earlier. He's documented this. And by the way, these aren't your garden variety liberals that are in charge of our education system. They're the most radical. But when you control not only your entire universities, but in particular, your colleges of education, of journalism, of law, of added economics, you utterly control our culture. And the left has been controlling our culture for over 50 years. And you know what? They also have a strategy. It's been in place since FDR. It's diabolically simple. It is depressingly effective. It is addict Americans to government. And our problem as conservatives, what's our counter strategy? Unfortunately, far too often our strategy is a circular firing squad, which doesn't work too well. Now, we may have differences over tactics, but I want to speak to everybody from the heart. If you saw my PowerPoint presentation, you can tell that we are at that tipping point. We are on a razor's edge in this nation. If we stay united, if we agree that 80% friend or 90% friend is still our friend, we just might have a chance to save this nation. If we are divided, we will lose and America will lose. We cannot allow that to happen. Now, the sad reality is President Obama was reelected. I could not have been more depressed. The sad reality is Obamacare was passed into law, and it's going to be extremely difficult to dislodge it. But tell you what, we got some opportunities. You know, politicians, I hear them say it all the time, we have to restore faith in government. Absolutely not. That is the wrong strategy. Worried about saving this country, we need a lot more of those people in Washington, D.C. We got to defend freedom. We got to defend business. You know, I come from the business world. It is offensive when people demonize business people. You know, it's not easy running a business. Most businesses fail. It's really hard to develop or conceive of a product or service that people actually want to buy. It's even harder producing it at a cost that is less than people are willing to pay. You know, most business owners I know, sure, they're motivated by profit. They're far more motivated by a passion to build something. They care about the people that work with them. I don't have stats on this, but it's my belief that probably more businesses go bankrupt because the business owner just simply cannot bring himself to lay people off when he knows he should. when he's fallen upon hard times. Those are the people, that's the business people I know. Those people should not be demonized. Those people should be praised. Their success should be celebrated. Their success needs to be incentivized. Now, when I go around, I give my PowerPoint presentation, I've got an unfortunate but very unique ability to turn a group of smiling faces into frowns. So I have to kind of close things up frequently with a little bit of hope. Let me give you a little hope. Tim originally asked the members of the military, the finest among us, to stand up and be recognized. God bless you. You know, I think you made me understand that the Obamacare law, the passage of that was the negative inspiration for my giving up a good life and seeking office. The positive inspiration dates back to 9/11. As I saw these kids, 18, 19, 20 years old, step up to defend not only our freedom, but travel halfway around the world to establish democracies for people, let's face it, whose cultures give rise to our enemies. It's extraordinary. You know, as a member of Congress, the best part of being a senator is the unique contact I have with the finest among us. Like most members of Congress, I go to Walter Reed, I go to Bethesda. Let me admit, the first time I went, I wasn't looking forward to it. I knew what I was going to see. Men and women with horribly broken bodies. You know what's awe-inspiring? What is inspiring? Their spirit isn't broken. I was in Walter Reed the week before they closed it down, transferred everybody to Bethesda. I went to the rehabilitation ward. There were 12 of the finest among us there. 5 were missing 3 limbs. When I say missing 3 limbs, there's not much left. One of those individuals had his beautiful wife and daughter helping him with his rehabilitation, which should remind us it's not just their sacrifice. It's the sacrifice of their sons, their daughters, their husbands and wives, their mothers and fathers. You know, I hear this nation's war weary. I can certainly understand that 1.5% of Americans that are bearing the full burden while they're weary. I can't help, as I'm talking to these brave men and women, I just ask them, son, what deployment did you hit that IED? The answers are always 3rd deployment, sir, 4th, 5th. One of those AAA amputees, I was talking to him, he said, sir, when I get done with my rehabilitation, I go up to the floor where the new guys come in. Just kind of taking it upon myself to boost them around. Now, there's no way you can leave an encounter like that not in total awe, not completely inspired, not full of hope. I realize, trust me, how frustrated you are. Nobody can out-frustrate me. I know how depressing it was on November 6th. But let me tell you, America is worth preserving. This 237-year-old experiment is something precious. The finest among us, they're not giving up hope, nor should we. Amen. I'm really here to testify that the spirit of America, the dream of America, is alive. It's alive and well. It lives in the hearts of the finest among us. It certainly lives in your hearts. Our job isn't to get frustrated, to get depressed, to give up. Oh, what's the point? Our job is to double down, put our nose to the grindstone, serve our nation with the dedication that the million Americans who have given their life to preserve our freedom show it. That the finest among us continue to show. I cannot beg you enough to stay engaged in the struggle, fight for our freedom, for your freedom, defend it to the last. God bless America.
Please direct your attention to the screens for a video from our sister organization, Americans for Prosperity.
Let me repeat, nothing I'm proposing tonight should increase our deficit by a single dime. I'm announcing the launch of 3 more of these manufacturing hubs. Now is the time to reach a level of research and development not seen since the height of the space race. We must do more to combat climate change. Fund an energy security trust. Redesign America's high schools. Our government shouldn't make promises we cannot keep.
Please welcome to the stage Teresa Oki, Vice President of State Operations at Americans for Prosperity Foundation.
How's everyone enjoyed the conference? Have you learned something that you can take back home and use? Can I ask you a question? Isn't it easy to go back home and get busy with life and forget all of the good things that you committed while you were here to go back and do? Isn't that the easiest thing to do? Well, that's good. That's good. You know, it's so important for us. We are the first generation of Americans to leave our children a country that isn't better off than the generation before us. Many of you have heard Reagan's words, "You and I have a rendezvous with destiny." We will preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth. Or we will sentence them to take the first step into 1,000 years of darkness. But there's a second part of that quote. If we fail, at least let our children and our children's children say of us that we justified our brief moment here, that we could do all that could have been done. Now, 2 of my sons are here today over in that corner. I can't quite see them. But I can assure you that this mom is committed to doing everything that I can possibly do. So I want you to take just a moment and think of your son or daughter, your grandchild, your grandchildren. And I know that if you commit to do all that you can do when you go back home to make a difference, that we will not fail. Our next speaker is absolutely committed to doing everything he can do, whether challenging faculty lounges or newsrooms of mainstream media or Hollywood studios. The Weekly Standard calls him the most dangerous man on television. Perhaps best known for his Fox News Channel program, Red Eye. Please welcome Greg Gutfeld.
Does anybody want to hold my water? There you go. There you go. When I want it, you better give it to me. It's interesting, when I was walking into this building, no heckling, please. Stand up! Stand up. You know what? This is over. How dare you? Dana's been in Africa. I don't need this.
She told us.
All right.
Uh-oh, I'm sorry.
Calm down. I was outside. I was walking into this building. There was an employee out there and holding this sign. How may I help you? And I said, I would like your sign.
I'm the government. She might get half her sign back, but I doubt it. A lot of things I can do with this sign. So anyway, I'm here because, not because of Red Eye, because you guys watch The Five. Red Eye is on way past everybody's bedtime, unless you have certain urinary problems. Speaking for myself. But I figure you guys have some questions about The Five that I think I'll just answer for you right away. Is Bob Beckel like that all the time?
Yes, yes, yes.
No, sometimes he sleeps. And he talks in his sleep, and it's worse. What's Dana Perino like? Imagine Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde without the Jekyll. She's an adorable version of MacArthur. What's up with Jasper? All she talks about is Jasper. Let you in on a little secret. It's not a dog, it's an immigrant in a throw rug. She's a very sick, troubled woman. Somebody has to talk to her about it. Is Eric Bolling really that patriotic? There's an interesting fact about Eric Bolling. On his back, he has a giant tattoo of the American flag. But the flag has a tattoo of Eric Bolling. Kind of weird. But I'm not one to judge. I'm not a judge. Frankly, I don't even think judges should judge. That's kind of judgmental. People say, they go, what's with Kimberly Guilfoyle and Andrea Tantaros' shoes? Well, they weigh an average of 60 pounds and they're powered by canaries. All right, enough making fun of my co-hosts. Although I can do it all day, trust me. You don't know what it's like. All right, so I didn't know very much about Americans for Prosperity, but I looked it up, and I was really surprised to find out that there's no opposite group. There's no Americans against prosperity. But I was wrong. I actually did some research, and I found out there's Harvard, Yale, Berkeley, Brown, Occupy Wall Street, MSNBC, the White House, most of Europe, Vermont, yoga instructors, animal rights activists, groovy high school counselors who have all the answers. Take a year off, backpack through Europe. Environmentalists, animal rights activists, did I already say that? Pop stars, actors who look like Matt Damon, actors who are Matt Damon, anti-fracking freaks, teachers unions, guys named Kyle in Che shirts. Che Guevara, you know the guy? He's a murderer, but they wear him on shirts. So in 30 years, we'll have the Boston Bomber on a shirt. And, of course, the worst of all, kittens. You know who's against prosperity? Kittens. Did anybody follow that story that happened in New York on Thursday? 2 kittens were on the subway tracks. So they stopped the actual subway, shut down the subway for 2 hours, so they could get the cats, these kittens, these adorable kittens off the track. Now, I love kittens. Who doesn't love a good kitten? Between a bun? But hear me out, because this exposes the fundamental hypocrisy of American culture. Why kittens and not rats? Rats are all over the subway. Kittens are just rats with great PR. I'm getting to a point. Kittens, they work it. Rats, they don't work it. Rats, maybe they could, if they just maybe worked on their personality a bit, they could become a squirrel. Somehow I fashioned this into a metaphor about conservatives in politics. We're seen as rats, but we need to be seen as squirrels, or perhaps kittens. The bad news is we will never be seen as kittens, so give up. It's great to be a rat. Rats need to act like kittens so they can eat the kittens. Still don't know what that means. But you know what? It sounds right. Co-opt their beliefs, infiltrate, and then eat them alive. I talked about the Americans Against Prosperity. Interesting story that I came across on the plane, because sometimes I like to read, or I have someone read to me because I'm lazy, and I can afford a reader. Have you heard about these genetically modified plants that glow? Do you know what I'm talking about? Just pretend. Arabidopsis. These are plants in which they inject genes from bioluminescent bacteria into the plants, so the plants will actually glow in the dark. This is awesome. This is an amazing invention, incredibly innovative. Think about it for places that don't have electricity. How great this would be. You know who's against it? The leftist creative class. The same people that are against fracking or against any kind of progress on this earth. Kickstarter, which is a fundraising site, had raised $500,000 for these plants, but they tried to stop them. These activists tried to stop it because they claimed that these glowing plants were artificial. It's bacteria. Bacteria is not artificial. People that come out against business and enterprise hate anything that they can't do. That is the bottom line. For all the anger and for all the envy that you come across, it's because they can't do it. And they hate people who can. The anti-man-made movement is really crawled up my butt, so to speak. It's driven me crazy. Do you think an activist that is against modern technology would turn down the best medicine in the world if their loved one or they were suffering from a deadly disease? They sit there and they campaign against for animal rights and animal testing, but you know, if there was a medicine that would cure their disease, they would test it on their grandmother. I'm not making this crap up. Look at DDT. DDT ban, what did that lead to? Thousands or millions of deaths due to malaria. Look at the anti-vaccine movement. What does that cause? That's caused a rise in measles in Europe. Look at the attacks in the fields for vitamin A enriched genetic modified rice in the Philippines. This is rice that's created to prevent blindness in kids. Doesn't matter because it's not their kids. Prosperity is mocked. Why is prosperity mocked? Because it is seen as safe as opposed to risky when the opposite is true. Because when you think about it, who really takes risks in life? It's the businessman. The businessman every day is playing with his own money. He's not playing with government's money. He's not playing in a casino called the USA. I compare it to the daredevil. I hate daredevils. Daredevils make me sick. Remember the guy that was going over the Grand Canyon? That's not work if people are praying that you fail. Generally, you root somebody on, but when you're going, I hope he falls, why am I watching this? It's far riskier to open a business in New York City than it is to walk across the Grand Canyon because of the regulations and because of all the stresses involved in trying to start something with your own money, something that you know will fail. That is a true risk. Pop culture has a lot to do with this, I guess you'd say, demonizing of business. If you wear a suit nowadays, you're usually the bad guy. If you carry a BlackBerry, you're probably the bad guy. It's a cliche. My belief is the more boring you are, it's inversely proportional to the risk that you take. For example, I've met Mickey Rourke a couple of times. He's a wild man. If you're looking for Eastern European prostitutes or drugs, call him. But you don't want him to do your accounting. Business suits exist, so Mickey Rourke exists. People in business suits exist, so their offspring can protest at Occupy Wall Street. Without businesses, there would be no anti-business. I thought that was a pretty good thing. What drives a lot of this acrimony towards business is a misunderstanding that if you earn something, someone else loses. It omits or ignores the effort that's done prior to getting paid. They never talk about how hard you work. It's just that you bought a car and somebody else doesn't have that car. Why is this done? Why do people believe this way? I've studied this for years and I've done a lot of research and I came to the conclusion that they're jerks. Prosperity is not the result of luck. Prosperity is a result of work. I don't know a lot of things, but I know one thing. I know how to work. If you're talking to me and I have a blank look on my face, it's because I'm working. It's great for a job, but it's lousy for a marriage. But my marriage is fine, but I'm just sympathizing with my wife who talks to me, and then I'm like sitting around thinking about 16 jokes I can make about Dana's hair. By the way, I forgot to mention, you know that glow-in-the-dark bacteria comes from Dana's hair. I don't know how people don't work. I see a lot of people who want to work no matter what their disadvantages are, they still work. I don't want to know people who don't work. I am a work bigot. I am a workist. I don't know how to get people to work more. I have some solutions. All of them will work. But frankly, I don't know if I want to share them. But I will talk about how I framed my working life. My first job out of college was at the American Spectator, which is a conservative magazine out of Arlington, Virginia. Go ahead and clap. It was a miserable experience for me. I made $363 every 2 weeks. I worked in the mailroom, which, by the way, sexist. It was grim. Want to hear a funny story? And this is true. I'll tell you that. And the great thing about working in the mailroom, and the great thing at a bottom-rung job, is that you have stories to tell. And then when you move up, it's great because you can tell people these stories, and you feel good when you move up. You can't look down at the bottom rung. You should start there and work up. Little poetic language there that I ripped off myself. Couple of memories. My first day on the job in the mailroom, which I don't think they have anymore now that they have email. Maybe they have an email room. I was in there. The other guy that was working in the mailroom sensed competition. Wasn't a big fan of me. We turned out to be pretty good friends. We got married in Vermont. No, I'm kidding. This is a true story. This is a true story. So I'll call my friend Ed. Ed comes in and he goes, look, you're going to get a lot of unsolicited manuscripts. It's impossible to read them. You get them from everywhere. You get them from congressmen, you get them from that. You get them from this guy a lot. And he hands me a manila envelope because you're gonna get this guy all the time. Don't even read it. Just don't read it. That's what all you gotta do is just write a letter, thank you, we got it, and whatever. And I just looked down on it. And I won't tell you who it was, but his name rhymed with Mush Bimbo. I'm not joking. I am not kidding. That's how stupid we can be. The other upside of working a really miserable job where I had no money in my pocket and I didn't know how to take a girl out, I had to borrow money on it for dates, was that I got to meet Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, I'm sorry, I was talking about his son. Ron Reagan. Yeah. We took ballet together. See, I hate it when you people jump to conclusions. No, actually, I did meet Bob Tyrrell, who was my boss, invited Ronald Reagan over for dinner, and President Reagan does this like twice a year. So he came, and I met him. The instinct of when you meet somebody like that is that it is somebody in a Reagan mask. That's your only, because you actually miss out on the experience because you don't actually believe it. And I remember what I said to him. He said hello, and I said, what? Anyway, I'd like to say that I have some in common with President Reagan. As you know, he was an actor. And for a few movies, he played opposite a monkey named Bonzo. And I work with Beckel. Stop it. I feel guilty for saying that. I feel guilty. Bob is a great guy. Though he does love his crackers. Keeps him trim. So I'm going to tell you a semi-serious story about what happened when I realized that I was miserable in Arlington, Virginia. I was living with 2 elderly women in a house on George Mason Drive, and I thought, you know what? I want it all. This is how every kid thinks, and this is the mistake, that they want to be famous. They believe they have all the information in their head born. They have the movies that they want to write. They have the great American novel. It's all in here. Somebody just needs to go like this, clack, 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 pull it out, because we're too lazy to do it. But we'll tell you about it. The worst thing if the worst sign of the best sign of a bad writer is that he tells you what he's writing, because that means he's not writing. So anyway, I had this script, and I wanted to be famous. And my fraternity brother his dad was a lawyer for a film director named Arnold Kopelson, who had just won, I think it was an Oscar for Platoon. And this is like 88 or something. And he said I could get you a meeting with him, which is pretty amazing. I'm a 23-year-old guy, and I don't know crap. Watch my language. And so I said, sure. So I flew to San Mateo. My mom and I went to the shopping mall and went to the Emporium. I bought a $100 suit, got on a plane, sat next to a soap star from All My Children, Mickey something. Anyway, not important. So I'm really nervous, and when I'm nervous, as the people here can attest, I go to the bathroom a lot. It's just a thing. Athletes do it, but I have to keep going to the bathroom because my stomach is going crazy. So that's an issue, not for now. Privately, we can talk about it, but not here, and I'm kind of offended that you're interested in it. But, so I'm excruciatingly nervous, and I go up to this, I think it's like in Beverly Hills, I don't know, because I've never really been there, it could have been Bel Air, and I get up to this nice house, and this little maid opens the door, and she says hello, and I go, I'm Greg, I'm supposed to meet Mr. Kopelson. She says, come on in, and I walk in, there's this sunken living room, and I hear this booming voice, I'm in the tub! So he was in the bathtub. I've never met him. I'm assuming he meant a bathtub. So anyway, as I'm walking in, so I have memorized essentially the script that I want to tell them, the movie I want to write, the movie that I want to make, and all this crap that I have no real knowledge of. And I walk down, and as I'm walking to the left, I see a butler against the wall holding a tray. And I immediately turn away, and I sit down in front of him, and I'm on this couch. And I'm sitting there and waiting for this man to come downstairs, and I'm just sitting, and it's just complete silence. And it's dawned on me that there's no way I can actually do this with somebody standing behind me listening. I was so worried about what this person thought about me, why that person was there, the fact that this person knew that I was an imposter, that I had no business being there, that I'm probably a loser, that I probably have not a single whit of creativity in my head, and that he actually came from somewhere to get a job in Hollywood, and now he's a butler, and he thinks I'm an asshole. So I was sitting there for 10 minutes. And so Kopelson comes down, he sits down, we have some small talk, and he asks me like what the story was about. And he could sense that I was not in good shape. And I started to tell it, and it wasn't making any sense. I was stuttering. All I kept thinking about was this guy behind me who was driving me crazy. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but I could not get this person out of my head. He was there, and he was in my head, and I was blowing the greatest opportunity of my life. And then Kopelson kind of sensed, this isn't going well. And he goes, do you want a beer? And I said, okay. And so he left. And it was either a Michelob or a Lowenbrau, because it was that era of bad beer. And so I sat there, and I was sitting, and I go, you know what? The only way I'm going to salvage this thing is if I actually kind of stand up and I break the bread with this guy, and I say hello, and I try to talk to him, because this is not going to happen as long as he's behind me. So I got up and I turned around to say something, and it was a dummy. It was a weird dummy. Who has a dummy holding a tray? But it was like one of those things that people collect. And I was like I almost fainted. And so I'm like going like, oh God. You know, it's like that thing at night when you were a kid and you thought you saw a monster in your room and you turn on the light and it's a hanger on a doorknob and you're like, oh. But then you turn the light off again, and then you see it again, and you go, it's back again. And you turn on and go, no, it's changed back into a hanger. But anyway, so Copleston came back down and was much more relieved, and I told the script, which was an interesting idea about a man whose id leaves his body and does everything that he wants to do that he doesn't have the guts to do. And it was an idea that I think it was more of a reflection of what I was thinking at the time, that I was too scared to do what I wanted to do. And he was very encouraging, and he said, you should probably quit your job. And he put me in contact with one director who was not the best director, Lloyd Kaufman, if anybody knows that name. Surf Nazis Must Die. No? Anyway. So, I went back to the American Spectator and I quit my job. And I got in my car and I drove across country, and I had no job, I had no money, and I moved back home with my mom, and I had nothing. And I was 23, and but I had something. I had my mother, who was the best support that I've ever had in my life. And she's, always been there. But the one thing I learned is that I learned how to work, even for nothing. I got up every morning and I wrote for, 6 hours a day. I sent thousands of applications out to every single job you could imagine. I was relentless. And this is back in the day when you didn't have email, so I was mailing this crap. I was going to the post office every day. The high of it was when I sent something to Christopher Buckley, who was editing Forbes FYI, and he actually wrote me a handwritten note. And I don't know how important that is, but if you ever have an opportunity to do something like that to somebody, you should do it, because it was something that kind of made me feel like I was going somewhere. He wrote a note that he said that he thought my writing was great and to keep at it, and when I have something, send it to him. And it was handwritten, and it's like, holy, that's amazing. It was Christopher Buckley, William F. Buckley's son. Jesus. The low point was when a friend of mine had put me in touch with the Wall Street Journal, a fellow there, a young guy there who was on the editorial page, and I had sent the same clips to that guy, and I called him up and I said, hi, this is Greg Gutfeld. I was wondering if you got my samples, my clips. And he said, yes. I go, well, were you interested? He said, no, and he hung up. That name rhymes with David Frum. Because it was David Frum. Do you know who he is? Sometimes when people look like a dick, they are. Is that bad? I gotta jump ahead because it says I got 1:12 left and I've got 5 more cards to go. Talk about the fact that I've been fired 3 times. Because I think it's important to get fired. You should be fired as many times as you can, because that means you're actually breaking some... I don't mean being incompetent. I mean by doing something out of the ordinary. You're not working to save your job. You're working to kind of do something different. I was fired for Men's Health I was the editor of Men's Health. I was fired for doing a piece called The Best Campuses for Men. It was during the time when all the PC speak was coming up, and it turns out that the publisher of the company came from Georgetown, and I had that as like one of the worst colleges for men. I was gone. But not before I slipped in my editorial letter that I had been fired. Every magazine has an editorial letter in the front, and before it went to press, I slipped in a letter saying that I had been fired and why, and it got in. They stopped the presses. They got half of the country. And it cost them $1 million. They were able to get half of the things out, but they didn't get the other half. And that got me my next job, which was Stuff Magazine, where I became editor-in-chief. And I doubled the circulation of that magazine. It was one of the greatest magazines ever. The reason why I got fired for that, and if you were at the event earlier today, I explained why it involved midgets. Do I need to tell that story? I apologize if you already heard it, and they're flashing this thing at me like I should stop. All right, so I was invited to speak at a How to Create Buzz seminar for the magazine industry. How to create buzz means, how to get attention for your magazine. And they had the Oprah, they had Rolling Stone, they had Glamour, they had Stuff Magazine. I said no, because I said, if you need a seminar on how to create buzz, you're hopeless. And I hung up. Ha ha ha. Then I thought, you know what, that was really stupid, because I probably could have done something fun. So I called back and I said, I changed my mind, and they said, it's too late, we hired the guy from Maxim, which is my sister publication. And I was kind of ticked off, and I thought, well, what could I do? What could I do to create buzz? So I called my friend Jeffrey Beecher, who runs kind of a circus theatrical thing, and I asked him if he had any little people. Back then we called them other names, but now we call them little people. I hired them, and I reserved seats at this seminar on how to create buzz, and I had them dressed, one as a dandy, another one as a preppy, and one as a mafioso. And they had clipboards, and on their clipboards they had their cell phones on vibrate. So when their phones rang on the clipboard, it would create buzz. So when the speaker would start speaking, their phones would go off, and there'd be all this buzzing. But that wasn't the real stab that I was trying to get at. When it happened, I think it was Cindy Levy, who was the editor. I don't know, it was a women's magazine. They all kind of blend, but she said, "Excuse me, would you turn off your phone?" to the one in the front row, and he says, "Is it because I'm short?" Pretty awesome. But the best part about this was there was a woman who stood up. This had gone on for like 15 minutes. And this woman stood up and said, "Can't we admit that there's something going on here? Look, like, it's like we've never seen three little journalists before." And I'm thinking, how bigoted is that? Nobody said a word because they were so terrified of being seen as bigoted or anti-politically correct. Nobody, she was right, she's going, there's something going on here. Nobody said anything. Then they got security, they got the little guys out. A month later, I got called up to the president office and all that stuff, and was yelled at and blah blah blah. And it got into. But the best thing about it is it got into every newspaper. The Post, the New York Times, created buzz. That was the point. I got fired under the rubric of promoted. This is how incompetent magazine publishing is that they never fire anybody, really. They just promote you out of your job. So I became director of brand development, which meant that I hung around in Los Angeles and got drunk and tried to pick up Scientologists. I guess I gotta stop because it's 30 minutes. All right. I just skipped a really good story too. No. I'll just jump ahead. I won't talk about okay, so it's good to get fired. It's good to get fired because firing always leads to something else. The midget thing, little person, sorry, got me the job at Maxim. At Maxim, when I worked there, my writing for the Huffington Post alerted Fox News. When I lost my job at Maxim over the article IKEA Sex Party, FNC hired me. Do I need to explain IKEA Sex Party?
No, come on.
When half the people say no. It's about, I thought it would be funny to take the instructions. Actually, I changed that. A friend of mine thought it would be funny if you took the IKEA instructions and combined it with the Kama Sutra. That's all it was. So that's a fairly innocuous way of describing it, but I got in trouble. But then every time that something like that happened, it was breaking some kind of ground, and some of it was good, some of it was bad. But I ended up at the Huffington Post writing really weird stuff that upset the liberals there. I pretended I had this fantasy life. I built this fantasy life around me so they couldn't call me a normal conservative. I was married, but I created a fictional a roommate named Scott, a flight attendant, who was never around, but whenever he'd come home, he'd bring home strangers, and I'd be very upset. And I kept doing this, and you would watch the homophobia from the Huffington Post commenters come after me. And I thought that was an interesting lesson, because only the left can be bigoted. Which is fine, let him be bigoted. Anyway, so now I ended up at Red Eye, which I had no idea what I was doing. I was awful. It was, if you ever saw the first shows, it was really terrible. I was hated not just by liberals, but conservatives. The amount of mail from Fox News viewers that wanted me off the air vast outnumbered the liberals who hated the show, because they were going, what the hell is this train wreck? You got a fat, sweaty guy, me. You got this weird hermaphroditic creature named Bill, and you got this morose, cat-loving weirdo named Andy. What is wrong with this world? Why is it on Fox News? But it goes to my slightly better theory, that if you do something every single day, it gets slightly better. Sometimes it gets a little worse, but over time, it gets slightly better, and you get comfortable, and all of a sudden, lo and behold, you have a show. And that's because of Fox News, because they didn't stop it. They knew there was something there, and they knew there was something there in me, or else they wouldn't have thrown me into the fire. So, I have 3 cards. The 5. Nobody saw that coming. It's been an immense success. My role, my philosophy that you should use in life is whenever you have an opinion, you should pretend that you're drunk. How do I have 6 opinions every day on something? But I do. I mean, we have 6 topics. Sometimes we have 8. How could I have an opinion on everything? That's physically impossible. But when you're drunk, you have an opinion on everything. It's true. So I don't drink before the show. But what I do is I sit on in front of my on my desk, in front of my computer, and I channel the drunk inside me. And I go, and so it's like, let's say they're talking about, I don't know, Obamacare. And I go, you know what's wrong with Obamacare? You ever go to 7-Eleven and there's that last hot dog on that thing going around? That's Obamacare. I actually said that. But pretending that you're drunk sometimes allows you to open up part of your brain and say something you haven't said before, and maybe something that no one said before. I'm not saying say awful things. I'm just saying at certain points, you should kind of like free your brain a little bit and go, what would I say if I was wasted? And anyway, the reason why I talk about work is because it's the most important thing to me. I don't know what I would do if I wasn't working. And it pains me to see that we may have a generation or two that doesn't feel the same way, and that's scary. Work doesn't have to be glamorous. All work has to do is fill a hole, not literally, but metaphorically. We all have this hole that we need to fill. And it's weird, you fill it up on Monday, on Tuesday it's empty, and you fill it up again. And you're like, oh, I feel pretty good. And the next day you're like, you know, if I don't do it again, I'm gonna feel miserable. It's a desire to be something by doing something. And I think that if you lose that hole, you're gonna end up in one. And that's what I worry about. We need to re-educate somehow that work is actually, and I hate to say it, but cool, because it sounds so old fogey, but it's cool to sweat, whether it's menial, it's cool to solve problems, if they're simple or not. All of these variables are satisfied even by mundane chores. So the most uncool thing that you could be doing is nothing and pretending it's something. That's it.